What's up? It's Sofia Gutierrez with Arena Football One, and today I'm joined by none other than Southwest Kansas Storm player Robert Cooper. I think I had a list there.
It's all good. It's all good.
How are you
It's all
doing,
good.
Robert?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Can't complain. Happy to be talking with you today.
I hear you. I'm glad to be here. Nice to meet you. And I'm just grateful for this opportunity.
Of course. Now, I see that you're wearing a Seahawks.
Yes,
Uh,
man.
but I want to get into some of the teams that you've dabbled into in a bit. But I want to get started with where your love for football and where your journey began. You're from Georgia
Yes, man.
and you played football in high school, but tell me when that initial love for the game started.
That game, that love for the game just came from really, I think, just being around my family. Just, I came from a football family. My brother, he was born in '91, so he's 9 years older than me. So I got to see his journey. I got to see how the work that goes into, working towards your dream. And, my father played college ball and played ball in the Navy and things like that. And, being around them and, learning that mindset, just helped mold me into who I am to this day. So I really think, I think my brother and my dad really gave me that love for the game that I needed to be successful for sure.
Yeah, definitely big supporters. But I've also heard some say that their siblings could also be really honest with them. So they'll call you out like, man, you didn't make that catch or you didn't
Yeah.
take them down. But you
Yeah.
had your brother who played, your dad who also played. When did you know that you wanted to take it all the way?
I would say I'll say around sixth grade, because sixth grade, that's when I started. I was kind of, bigger. I was the biggest kid. Sixth grade. I was touching 300 pounds. That's when I started lifting real heavy with my dad, because my dad had me lifting in elementary school. So around the sixth grade, I was benching over like 315. I was, putting up crazy numbers. And then when I was going to these camps and, going to visit my brothers at these colleges, and I was just seeing the love I was getting, and just the type of feedback I was getting, just at that age, just knowing that, man, there's something, football can really take me far, in life, and, give me the things that I want to be successful. So, just, yeah, that's when I
Mhm.
really knew. And, of course, dominating, and once I was dominating everybody, I knew that, this was my thing. This football is mine right here.
And when you were in high school looking at which college to continue your football career, how did you land on Florida State?
It was kind of, hard, not too hard, because, Florida State was one of the first colleges to give me a chance. I got my first look from Indiana University, which is the college my older brother went to, and they gave me my first offer in the eighth grade. But I think Florida State
Wow.
was really, yeah, Florida State was the first school that really, scouted me, really understood who I was as a player, and understood that the role that I could, bring to that defense. And, it was something that stuck out. A lot of teams reached out, and, the Georgias, of course, I took my visits and stuff, but when it came down to making that decision, Coach Odell and Coach Jimbo and Coach Taggart at the time really, stuck it out, really, really stuck it out for me. So I ended up signing early and going to Florida State and keeping my loyalty, because I committed as a sophomore when they offered me the scholarship. I committed on, so, yeah, I stuck it out all the way. So, yeah.
That's amazing. And what did you study while you were at Florida State?
When I first came in finance, and like I told you, I got humbled a little bit, and ended up going to sociology, and worked out pretty good for me, and something that I was really interested in, and made college that much more fun for me, because playing football is what makes it fun, but it was the classes, and that also made it good for me too.
So we both share that commonality in college, getting humbled because
Yeah,
it's real. It's real. And I'm
most
sure we're
definitely.
not the only ones.
Yeah, I know there's many people who can relate to this one.
Yeah. Now, talk to me about your time at Florida State. Did you see a common goal with all the players wanting to get to that next level? Or were some just like, I love the game, but this is as far as I'll play?
I mean, you definitely seen some of that. I'm pretty sure you see some of that in every college program, and you know the love for the game is different for everybody, and it's something I mean, you can't hate or bash. It's some people love the game differently, but my time at Florida State was, I mean, I would say it's one of the best times I ever had. I learned from one of the, I mean, the best defensive line coach in the game, Coach Odell Hagens. He's been coaching for like 30 plus years, and I soaked up most of the knowledge that I could out of him for those 5 years. And I was getting recruited by Jimbo, so those talks with Jimbo Fisher helped. And when Coach Tag came in, and he helped me a lot. And just, man, I just owe Florida State so much, because I mean, Florida State was just a great program and great university for me. And we had our, I learned a lot, because we had our losing seasons and we had our our great seasons. So you learn a lot in those moments, like in life. You learn a lot when you're down, and you learn a lot when you're up. But in all, Florida State taught me a lot of lessons from off the field, on the field. I definitely feel like I walked in Florida State, and left a way, different, different football player and man, as a in a good way.
Yeah, and you definitely left your mark in Florida State, because we have to talk about the Bobby Bowden Leadership Award that you got following your 2022 season.
Yeah. It was that season was real special. It was definitely an honor to get that award, especially named after a legend like Bobby Bowden. He's just I didn't know much about Florida State before I got there, and I committed just because like I told you, the loyalty and everything. But once I got to Tallahassee, you really start to realize the impact. And I mean, just this whole university is based off of what Bobby Bowden did, and his his morals, and how he led his teams to success. So just knowing that that's what we tried to live through every day, even when we like I shout out to Coach Mickey Andrews when we brought Mickey Andrews back. And that's the standard we try to live to every day at Florida State, and I hope that they're still doing it now. And I know they are, but there's, like we always say, there's a standard when you play at Florida State, and that's just what it is.
Now, let's talk about what came after Florida State. You're wearing a Seahawks shirt, but I also know that you spoke to the Miami Dolphins, the Philadelphia Eagles. How was that in your career?
Dream come true. Like I'm pretty sure every football player who puts on them cleats dreams about being on a NFL field. But like I said, it was a dream come true. And like I said, Florida State prepped me so much for for that opportunity. And it was it was definitely fun. Rubbing elbows with some of the greatest in the game, and learning from some of the greatest at my positions. I was grateful enough to go to Seattle and learn from guys like Mario Edwards, Jari Reed, Fletcher Cox with the Eagles, Brandon Graham. Be around guys like Calais Campbell, who've been in the game since '04. So just that's the best thing I can say. Just picking up knowledge and putting that in my game and in my life to help me get to those levels that I want to get to, because I know that my journey's still going. But if whatever they did, obviously it helped help them get to where they're at. So just try to get as much knowledge as I can and apply it to my life. So yeah, those organizations were amazing towards me.
Mm-hmm. And your journey now is with the Southwest Kansas Storm, a team that I've been able to follow the first 3 games that you guys had. I think it was in Washington, and then Albany, and then at home in Garden City. Talk to me about the culture of arena football in Garden City.
Well, I mean, it's Dodge City, but I mean, the Dodge City is
so much traveling.
But the culture in Dodge City, I mean, it's amazing. I love this experience ever since I got here in February. Like I said, it's I basically grew up playing arena football, the video game, and just being here. And having this experience, especially with a special group of guys you know,
Mhm.
like these. So, it's been special for us, and it's been a joy having the fans come out and embrace us every home game we got. I feel like every home game is an advantage for us, as it should be. But just being able to go out there and give them a show, and knowing that when they come, they're expecting a show out of us. So just knowing that we got that same understanding is
Mhm.
what is going to help continue build this.
Most definitely. I think I got it confused with Garden City because the first time I flew out there, I flew into Garden City and then made the
Yeah,
drive.
because it's really, I think it's like a 40-minute drive in it. It's not that far.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, it's not that
And the
far. It's
last
not too
time I
far.
was there, it was Wichita, and then it was like a 2.5 hour drive,
Yeah.
about
Mhm.
2 hours. But
Yeah, I heard Wichita's a little ways away. Yeah.
but you can't beat that drive. It's so peaceful.
Mm-mm. Yeah, no, I mean, it's different, like I said, driving around, Georgia and Florida, and then driving around Kansas. It's totally different, views, but, it's definitely peaceful. Like you said, definitely, a lot of flat lands, see a lot of
Mhm.
grass and animals. So, yeah,
Mhm.
it's definitely peaceful.
Mhm. Now
Oh, and not a
another
lot of traffic either. Definitely not a lot of
at
traffic.
all. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, most definitely.
Now, another big change besides cities is the size of the field and the fan interactions.
Yeah.
How has that transition been? Because one day or one game, you could be talking to some of the fans, and then another play,
Yeah.
you could be landing on their lap or pushing
Yeah.
someone against the wall.
Yeah. Like I said, it's kind of now I'm gonna talk about the fan interaction first, because that's one of the things that really stood out to me, especially my first time in this league, and especially with our team, and then going to other team stadiums and just seeing how guys just interact with the fans. Because I wasn't like that at first, because especially where Florida State is things like that. We were so used to not paying the fans any attention because they're usually saying something crazy,
Mhm.
something. But it's crazy how there's everybody embraces you, and it's like they're on the field with us having that fun. So I got to a point now where I make a play and I go dap somebody up on that's standing on the barrier, and that's something I can't do. On
Mhm.
the outdoor field, but that's something special. And like you said, guys flying over the wall. I remember when I first seen that, because like I said, I never, other than the video game from 2003 and 4, but seeing that in person is different. It's more like what just happened. Is and then they just come over the top with it, and or you see a fan grab the ball out of the air, and that's still crazy. And like I said, this is something I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. But there's definitely been some crazy fan experiences, and then like I said, our bench is literally right next to the fans. That's
Mhm.
something different too. So, um, it could be I'll be interacting with the kids right there. Give them a little daps. A little something. Just we have a guy on our team. D-Wash. He's known for
Yep.
getting with the crowd. So when I known that that's what he was known for, so I started to pay
Uh-huh.
more attention to it, and it's just amazing just how everybody just embraces it, and that's what really brings people more into the game. When D-Wash scores and he runs to the fan and does a celebration with him, it's pretty crazy, and it is definitely a special moment, because not only is it a special moment for him, and you can only imagine what it does for that kid, or that fan that's sitting right there, because like we said, you don't get that experience in outdoor football, because like I said, when you do get close to them, it's either when they're walking off the field, they're focused, they're probably not paying attention, things like that. So it is right there. So, and then the field size, that's another big difference too. Like I said, you used to playing to 100-yard field, 50 yards wide. Now it's just 50. It's literally a 50-yard field, so things are happening faster. People are getting to their spots quicker, and that's one thing I told Rod is the speed of the game. There's not really a drop off. Speed of the game wise from where I came from, and in this league. And I think that's just what comes with it when when you're around guys who's committed to it. Like we practice like that. Here, in Kansas. Just
Mhm.
when just being smart and knowing what to do. putting the time in and knowing your spots, you get there faster. You find different ways to get there. So, and you see other teams doing it as well. So, that's another thing that that took me by surprise. Is I didn't think the speed of the game would be this fast, but you got linemen getting to their spots. You got the receivers getting to their spots. Quarterbacks going through their reads faster. Running backs hitting the hole faster. That's what that's what it is. So it's been a thing to get used to, but it's been fun.
Adjustments, but they're doable.
Yeah, most definitely, definitely.
Now, one of the biggest changes that we didn't mention, who's undefeated, the wall. How was that transition? Have you gotten used to it, or have you learned how to work with it?
I mean, I love it. Me, I would say I'm a violent guy, and I love when people hit that wall. It's the noise that it makes, and then I have my moments where I hit people into the wall, and I mean it's just the feeling of it. It's just the feeling and the noise, and it just does something to me. It's just it just makes. I love it. I mean, I wish we could do it in outdoor, but I know that's something that can't happen. But then again, that's what makes arena football special. That wall can be your best friend, or that wall can be your enemy. I want that wall to be someone's enemy, but I mean, I love it as my friend. So it's been real nice. So yeah, the wall has definitely been different, and it's fun.
It's definitely fun to watch as well. Being able to catch some of those hits up in person and pretty close has been very fun. I'd say a little more entertaining for me than, not having the wall at 100 yards.
Yeah.
But like you said, that's what makes arena football so special.
I think I'm about to say they say the wall keeps the runner safe, but I feel like I know it hurts. I know it hurts. I've never been on the other end of it, but I know it gotta hurt. I know you have to feel it. So.
Most definitely. Well, Robert, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. It's been exciting following you all season, and I can't wait to see what is next for you and the Storm.
I appreciate you. I appreciate y'all for having me, and let's finish this thing out well. I know that. So
yep.
Best of luck. See y'all soon.
Yeah, I'll see you soon.
So.